Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's news update for Thursday, October the 24th, 2013. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu returned to Israel early this morning after his two-day trip to Rome, where he met with Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta Tuesday night and with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry yesterday. The meeting with Kerry focused primarily on the issue of Iran, with the Prime Minister stressing that sanctions must not be eased against the Islamic Republic, and pressure must remain on Iran until it completely dismantles its nuclear program. And with Kerry reassuring Netanyahu that Washington would pursue a diplomatic initiative with Iran, but with eyes wide open, and that Iran would be held to the same standards as other countries to prove that its nuclear program was indeed peaceful, as it claims. Officials from Israel and the U.S. met in Washington, D.C. yesterday for a new round of strategic dialogue talks at the U.S. State Department. The talks, characterized by the State Department as the highest level regularly scheduled diplomatic meeting between the two countries, were last held in July of last year. A State Department press release said the talks highlighted the strong partnership that binds Israel and the United States. The U.S. delegation was headed by Deputy Secretary of State William Burns, and Israel's delegation was led by Israeli Minister for Strategic and Intelligence Affairs, responsible for international relations, Yuval Steinitz. The State Department said the talks focused on threats and challenges in the region, as well as ways in which the U.S. and Israel can further enhance their bilateral ties and advance peace. It said both sides reiterated their determination to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. The two delegations reviewed developments in Syria, including efforts to eliminate Syria's chemical weapon program, as well as threats to regional stability from terrorist groups such as Lebanese Hezbollah and Hamas. The delegations also agreed to continue close consultation on these issues and to meet again next year in Israel. And the Times of Israel reports that Israeli Intelligence Minister Steinitz spoke to Israel Radio this morning on the issue of Iran, where he reiterated the Israeli government's position regarding the Islamic Republic and said sanctions are the only tool that can cause the Iranians to give up their nuclear program. Steinitz made the comments during an interview with Israel Radio, where he said that there are some areas in which there are differences in outlook between Israel and the United States. But we, of course, presented our position here, which is extremely clear, that the greater the pressure, the greater the chance to reach a good arrangement. Steinitz added, we cannot, under any circumstances, remove the sanctions until there is a comprehensive agreement that prevents Iran from producing a nuclear weapon. Ynet reports, according to Palestinian sources, that Israel is set to deliver the bodies of 36 Palestinian terrorists to the Palestinian Authority. Israel reportedly agreed to hand over the bodies following a petition by the terrorist families with the High Court of Justice. Meanwhile, the Israeli organization that advocates on behalf of families of terror victims is asking the Israeli government to reconsider releasing over 100 Palestinian security prisoners as part of ongoing peace talks. Israel had agreed to release the prisoners as a gesture to Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas before the restart of peace talks in July. And the next 30 prisoners are set to be released by Israel in about a week. According to Israel Radio, the organization Al-Magor demanded today that the Attorney General order the government to reconsider the release due to the recent rise in terror incidents in the West Bank. The heads of FINA, the International Swimming Federation, issued a formal warning to officials in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates over disrespecting Israel at the recent swimming championship in Doha this week. As we reported to you yesterday, Qatari officials had removed the Israeli flag from televised footage, where it was replaced by a plain white flag next to the name of the competing Israeli swimmer. FINA Executive Director Cornel Marculescu told the Associated Press yesterday that the two organizing committees had apologized for the, quote, stupid incidents. Marculescu said next year we have the World Championships and these things will not happen anymore. The New York Times reports that Time Warner Cable has agreed to carry the channel Al Jazeera America. Al Jazeera America is owned by the Qatar-based Al Jazeera Media Network and premiered back in August of this year. The distribution deal with Time Warner is the first made by Al Jazeera America since that premiere. Al Jazeera's interim CEO, Ahab al-Shihabi, said once the deal was in effect, the channel would be available in about 54 million of the 100 million American homes that subscribe to satellite and cable television, up from about 44 million homes now. He said Time Warner Cable's decision was evidence that, quote, "we are providing fact-based, in-depth, independent news." It's unclear whether the channel was paying to be carried on the cable system. Mr. al-Shihabi declined to comment on that to the New York Times, but called the distribution deal a, quote, "win-win proposition." French politicians, scholars, and members of clergy are among 5,500 people who have signed onto a petition against the banning of ritual circumcision of boys in Europe. The petition was published last week by CRIF, the umbrella organization that represents France's Jewish communities. It follows the passing of a resolution by the Council of Europe earlier this month against the ritual of male circumcision, calling it a violation of the physical integrity of children. Although the resolution passed is not binding, as we reported to you earlier this month, Jewish groups are still concerned that its passage could have an impact on countries across Europe in determining their own legislation on the issue. A 90-year-old Holocaust survivor made his orchestral debut with renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma earlier this week, performing music composed 70 years ago in a concentration camp. The British Daily Mail reported that Dr. George Horner, who survived the death camps of Auschwitz, Buchenwald, and the Theresian concentration camp, where the Nazis allowed prisoners to stage artistic performances, played the piano and accordion while at the Theresian camp, including music written by fellow prisoner there, Karel Svank. Svank was killed by the Nazis, as were Horner's parents and sister during the Holocaust. Horner performed two of Svank's melodies this week in front of an audience of 1,000 at Boston Symphony Hall, in what he called a noble mission. The performance was a fundraiser for the Theresian Music Foundation, an organization that is dedicated to preserving the work of artists and musicians killed in the Holocaust. Renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma joined Horner in an additional piece and called the Holocaust survivor a huge hero and inspiration. Ma said of Horner, he is a witness to a window and to a slice of history that we never want to see again, and yet we keep seeing versions of that all over the world. He said, "I hope we are inspired by that and we keep that memory forever." And finally, tonight on Shalom TV at 8:30, you can watch Sweet Up, the recent Jewish blogging event hosted by author and blogger Lisa Alkalai-Klug. And then at 9, watch Lisa as she joins Mark Golub on L'chaim to talk about her book, Cool Jew, which looks at contemporary Jewish life. That's tonight here on Shalom TV and ShalomTV.com. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Thursday, October the 24th, 2013. I'm Teisha Bader.